All righty. Hi, everybody. We're going to kick off here. It's 2 past the hour. Thank you all for coming. We know that your time is valuable and intend to make this a productive and educational session for everyone. A couple of housekeeping notes. First off, I'm Mark Johnson, CMO of Bombora. There will be a Q&A at the end, so you can put your questions into the chat, either to the host and panelists ourselves, or directly to the group, and we'll try to get to all those time allowing. The webinar will be recorded, and finally, the report, the study that we'll be covering is available on the Bombora website for you to read the full piece. So in just a couple of moments, I'm going to be handing it over to our featured guest, Emma Conroy from Forrester Consulting, to take us through the study. But before we do that, I'm just going to spend a couple of moments giving a little bit of context for why we're talking about intent data, and a snapshot of how Bombora gets that intent data. So, first off, I think folks wouldn't be on the call if they didn't already have an interest and already were aware that Bombora, that intent data is becoming a staple of all B2B sales and marketing efforts. And there's a couple macro reasons for that have brought us to this point. First, the fatigue of the intrusion of advertising and sales activity. There's a lot of stats out there from 10,000 plus messages a day that humans are seeing, and the majority distrust advertising. That sentiment has led to a lot more regulation, cookie blocking, CCPA, GDPR, just a general backlash against what sales and marketing has been doing for some time. The other, another big dynamic is the evolution of business buying, and the way that buyers are educating themselves before they engage with sales and before they engage with vendors. And the fact that, depending on the stats, a buying committee is making the decision and influencing that. Any number from 5 to 20 people within an organization making that purchase decision. So we've got that as a background challenge, and the demand for growth and improved sales marketing performance continues to grow, which brings us to some more specific challenges in this next slide for B2B sales and marketing organizations. Almost half of us cite pipeline creation and demand gen as the top critical initiative. So always the need to grow pipeline and revenue. At the same time, business buyers, almost half of them want a sales rep free experience. They don't want to be told and sold. And then finally, the reps themselves are challenged to try to get access to the stakeholders, to that buying committee. So it's sort of a perfect storm of challenge to engage and generate business from sales and marketing teams to business buyers. And so, what are one of the answers? Well, it's not doing more. It's being more relevant and improving the results through that relevance. And so that's where Bombora's company surge data comes in. At a high level, this is data that tells businesses what other businesses are researching the products and services that you and your competitors sell. It's basically understanding what is being looked for and what the need is. And we're going to spend just a quick minute to talk about how that's done. So Bombora collects this data, this signal, from the largest consent-based cooperative of B2B publisher websites. There are a bunch of stats here about the scale, which is quite large, of that data collection effort. At the core is both consent and a mutual exchange of value, where publishers contribute this data and receive value back in terms of insights about their audience in a brand safe way. What this allows us to do is witness the research that's happening on those websites. And if you go to the next slide, we'll get into a bit of the details specifically. We're taking an understanding of what is on the page of a B2B website using natural language processing that understands at the topic level, what is that page about, which is different from a keyword scraping, for instance. It's the meaning of what's on the page. That is coupled with an identity graph that associates the content consumption with a specific company or account if you're doing account-based. And those two things together are the measure of the research activity that's happening prior to a business purchase. If you go to the next slide, what is critical to understand, and this is where one of, if not Bombora's greatest unique differentiator, is looking at that activity, the content consumption and the company over time. Within an organization, there might be an ongoing and constant interest in a particular topic or topics. But what happens that over time, as more people consume more content more deeply on those particular topics, that is the signal that that research committee or that buying committee is moving into the evaluation phase and getting closer and closer to making a purchase. And when we see that, it's assigned a score, and then that is flowed into sales and marketing activity. So at a high level, we're taking the understanding and the capture of the buying signal, the research signal, and flowing it into sales and marketing activity. And so it's no surprise that if you understand what buyers are interested in, and you put that into your sales and marketing activities, the performance improves. And so what we're looking at here is basically a collection of metrics that we've gathered from a self-reported, we work with, Bombora's been in business for about 6 years. We work with hundreds of companies of all sizes, from the smallest to the largest on the planet. And they've reported a range of improvement across different types of sales and marketing activities, from increases in the top left up to 120% in terms of marketing engagement, reduction in cost per lead, improvement of their marketing budget because of this efficacy, as well as pipeline expansion, doubling or 4 times it. So over the years, we pulled these metrics together and they've been borne out. But more recently, as in particular, we're moving into perhaps more uncertain economic times where budgets are maybe being squeezed a little bit more. We wanted to get a more quantitative and structured view of how that how ROI is created, particularly at an enterprise client. So we turned to Forrester Consulting and their methodology for evaluating that. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Emma to take us through that work. Emma.
Thank you, Mark, for having me here today, and welcome everyone. As Mark said, I'm a consultant at Forrester on the Total Economic Impact team, and we're a team of business value experts who help organizations quantify, articulate, communicate the value of any investment. And I'm pleased to share with you today the results of this study, which was commissioned by Bombora. So in terms of an agenda, we will start with an overview of the TEI framework. We'll walk through some of the customer journey. We'll get to the return on investment calculation, walk through the study results, and then, as Mark said, we will end with a Q&A session. So where did TEI come from? Well, when talking about justifications for technology investments, Forrester's research understood that technology buying decision makers today needed a next level business case that goes beyond a standard, total cost of ownership analysis to really identify what goes beyond that and prove a total return and not just look at that cost side. So the TEI methodology goes beyond that by covering these 4 pillars. So benefits, which captures any positive impact from an investment. That can be increased revenue. That can also be cost savings, productivity improvements, things like customer and employee experience. We look at costs, again, including hardware and software costs, but also some of the softer costs like training or labor costs, professional services, to try to really get that full picture. Flexibility is our third pillar here, and flexibility captures the possibilities that an organization unlocks in the future by making an investment in some technology today. And then finally, risk. So what factors or barriers make some organizations realize maybe a different investment result, not realize an investment's full potential, because we know that there is going to be variation in any technology investment. And to account for this risk in the full study, Forrester makes risk adjustments to all of the benefits to make sure that we're fully taking that into account with our ROI analysis. And our methodology here, we've spoken to a real current customer of Bombora's, and we're using their data as a basis for our model here. And ultimately, the goal of this framework is that we want you to be able to read this study, take the results you hear today, and begin considering how you might make a business case justification for Bombora for your own organization. So who did we interview? We interviewed an enterprise customer that uses Bombora's intent data, company search data across the organization. They are a global financial services company headquartered in the US with a total annual revenue of over $20 billion and over 30,000 employees. And prior to the investment in Bombora, the organization managed all of their lead data manually. They didn't have a comprehensive lead database. They didn't have access to behavioral or intent data. They were really just relying on these kind of lists of firmographic data. And as you can imagine, that led to some challenges. They had a really inefficient and a lengthy sales process. And that came from a couple of different pain points. So this lack of a unified database, they couldn't match a prospect's data across different data sources. They had issues with consistency on that end, inefficient and manual data organization. It's coming from that similar lack of a consistent database structure. So that slowed the process for lead conversion as well. They had no visibility into historical or future business trends, right? Because all of the data that they had was really point in time. And so they were lacking any kind of change, future looking time series information. And then finally, they had no way to prioritize their leads. So they turned to Bombora to solve these challenges. And I'll start by reading this quote on the right. So they did review other viable options, similar data providers, anything in the space, but nothing really compared to Bombora, not only with the data they had, but also with their integration capabilities. So it's worth mentioning here that for this customer, along with their decision to implement Bombora, they kind of undertook a whole initiative across their sales and marketing teams to transform their approach to B2B lead generation. So they undertook this initiative to build a robust database and with it an analytic data model that would support their sales and marketing teams, give them a data-driven approach to targeting and acquiring prospects and to retaining customers. And when they started thinking about how they were going to actually make this happen, they knew they had some access to basic firmographic and technographic data, again, those lists I mentioned, but they needed a way to really find and focus on leads with a higher likelihood to buy, or that prioritization piece to really feed the model. And they chose Bombora again to help them here because Bombora, they said, stood ahead of their competition in terms of data quality and quantity, integration capabilities, and their service team. And on the integration side, they integrated Bombora with their sales platform and marketing cloud in Salesforce, as well as with this new central database that they were constructing here. And that central database let them create what they called a customer golden record. So taking, again, that data from all these different data sources, but now they had that matching capability, that way to link it up and get one unified view into who their current and potential customers were. And I'll note that the interviewee here called Bombora crucial to the data model. They said that they were, the main contributor of behavioral data. So Bombora was really a big part of this initiative they undertook. And they said that without Bombora, this would have had a very, very different result. Bombora was really integral in this undertaking for them. So once they knew they were going to make this investment, they were going to start this data model, kind of rethink how they were approaching that B2B lead gen, they did have some specific goals. Ultimately, as I said, they wanted to bring together their disparate data sources, create that organized data structure. But for Bombora specifically, they really wanted to use Bombora to get ahead of their competition in the sales cycle. They also wanted to use Bombora to effectively prioritize leads, and that is where they started, as we'll see. And then finally, they also had a focus on improving customer retention. So those were the main goals they had when they began actually undertaking this work, and we're looking forward to what they were going to do with Bombora's data. So based on Forrester's analysis, this customer experienced a 3-year ROI of 342%, present value benefits of $5.4 million, and then the net present value here, which is just total benefits minus total costs, was $4.2 million. And I'll note that in our model, the payback here for Bombora is less than 6 months. So I'm sure, you know, the question's now, okay, where did this come from? Millions of dollars in benefits, but what is that coming from? So there's 4 benefit categories that we've quantified here. And you can see here, so improved conversion rate is the first one. That's additional revenue is the way it's quantified. We also have additional revenue from a faster sales velocity. We have savings from reduced customer churn, and then we have savings from data efficiencies. And again, these benefits total to a present value of about 5.4 million. This model is a 3-year model, so these numbers are all present value 3-year numbers. And in the actual study, we do break down these calculations. We have a whole table for each of these benefits into, again, that financial framework that we hope that you will be able to look at, understand, and apply that framework to your own organizations so that you can create more of a customized business case analysis for Bombora. But I definitely go read the study. We'll go through the benefits one by one here to give you a little bit more context in how this customer was realizing them. So that first benefit of the improved conversion rate, that was achieved in a couple of different ways with Bombora. So as Mark introduced us, so what one of the biggest benefits here was that Bombora could really give a signal or an alert to these teams when a lead in their database showed interest in a monitored topic. So they could choose the topics that they wanted to cover. They could choose a threshold of interest here. And then they were really able to see that real-time notification of this is a lead that you want to prioritize. They could then immediately act on those signals and so go after those leads that had the highest propensity to buy. And that obviously was really big efficiency factor in making sure that you're going after the highest value leads first. Bombora also helped them customize their marketing content to align with those potential buyers, their areas of interest, maybe their purchasing timelines, really helped with that customization piece on the marketing side as well. And then with that integration in Salesforce I mentioned earlier, the organization could automatically and continuously, move their most promising leads to the front of their sales pipelines. So again, ensuring they're always going after the sales with the highest likelihood of closing a deal. These together all did improve the conversion rate by an increasing factor between years 1 and year 3, as they really started to unlock the full potential of this data and their data model was improving. So we start with an 8% improvement and then it's 18% in year 3. And I see we have some questions coming in the chat and we'll try to get to those at the end.
I'll jump in on to add one, I guess, a little bit of color and consistency. The question, and it keys off of this use case, and we'll definitely get to those questions later, around what's the best way to get started or what's the best use case. Quite often we work with customers to focus on this sales prioritization use case for 2 reasons. One, because it can show the immediate return most quickly, regardless of the size of the organization, because the lift as it relates to whether it's an outbound motion with SDRs or assigning accounts that have high intent to AEs, and you can see that happen very quickly. The other piece is probably 3, those are very expensive resources, and the prioritization of those resources against high intent accounts and the return there is obvious and quick. And then the final is the organizational impact. And if you've got sales on board and seeing the results, then it's a lot easier to go to the other stakeholders, teams that are doing the other types of activities of engagement. And so that's something that we've seen. And I'll give it back to Emma, and we're going to make sure to get to those questions.
Yep, thanks, Mark, for that extra color. And Faye, to your question in the chat, I surged overnight on this quote. That's what that's a reference to these kind of alerts or notifications that this account did surge or show a high level of interest in that specific topic. So that's that way of understanding this is the account that you want to be prioritizing.
Yeah, and let's just answer it. We'll just do that right there. So I guess that's Faye as well as, so company surge is the trademark for our product. And it's been, I'll say, widely adopted in the industry as a term for an increase in intent as measured by content consumption, although it's specific to Bombora. So when you saw that chart, when we measure an increase and the score is 60 plus, so that's a higher amount against a historical baseline, people use that colloquially as surging. And those alerts get sent through, whether it's Salesforce or whatever system you're using, to indicate that there's high intent as measured by content consumption activity at that account. So that's, at a high level, what quote unquote surging is.
Thanks, Mark. I love these questions. We will try to get to them at the end. Just gonna try to get through the rest of this benefit category because there's a couple other things I did want to call out for this one in particular. And one was that attribution percentage into the data model. So as I said, this was kind of a revamp of the whole B2B lead gen and customer acquisition process for the organization. And we know that Bombora was crucial to that, as the interviewee said, but we're not going to give, every single piece of that conversion rate improvement directly to Bombora. So that's what that 65% number is there. This is also more easily laid out in the full case study, again, where we have these tables where you can see where we're getting all of the numbers that are going into the model. So two other things that are in here, we do apply a profit margin to this revenue. We do apply a 15% risk adjustment to this benefit. And with all that, we're still seeing that additional profit of $3.3 million from this benefit. So this is the most significant benefit that this organization has seen with Bombora from a financial perspective. And like Mark said, it's also a great one to start with for organizations of any size. So moving to the second benefit here, which was increased sales velocity or faster sales cycle. Bombora allowed the organization to cut their sales cycle time by up to 30% in year 3. So closing more deals, same amount of time. Obviously, there's a bit of a jump in revenue there. And again, Bombora's integration with Salesforce, that automated prioritization of outbound leads, also played a large part into realizing this benefit, because that prioritization really allowed the right leads to get into sales reps pipelines and also campaign pipelines faster. Again, we're taking that 65% attribution to Bombora into account in the model. We also have a risk adjustment here and that profit margin, and this benefit is still netting the customer a 3-year present value of $1.6 million. And to the point about, I think some of the questions were talking about thresholds and data quality here. So this interviewee, the Senior Director of Marketing Data, did have this great quote around the quality of the data and the quality of those company surge signals that they were getting from Bombora. They're able to draw the line pretty high, and they have seen, just time and time again that these signals are really backed up through what they're able to achieve with their sales process. The third benefit here is reduced customer churn, which was another big priority for the organization as they were going into this. And this anecdote on the right, I'm not going to read, but it exactly exemplifies, where this reduction in customer churn is coming from. So Bombora could basically put the organization's total existing customer list in its on kind of a watch list, and then proactively identify and alert the organization saying, oh, this current customer might be showing intent in your competitor, or they might be giving off signals that are indicating that this might be an account that you want to really check in on from a retention standpoint. And that absolutely has been playing out for this customer. They said that they were able to anticipate and prevent customer churn by contacting these customers when they got these alerts before a final decision was made, so they could then talk through again what they might do to keep that customer on board. And we reach a 10% reduction in customer churn in year 3. That again starts off at 6%, then 8 in year 2, and 10% in year 3. There's no attribution percentage for Bombora for this benefit because it really is the intent piece that's unlocking this capability for the customer churn. And the present value of this benefit with a risk adjustment of 10% is about $300,000. So finally, our last benefit is a little bit different here. It doesn't have to do with revenue, but it's instead measuring the time savings that the organization's marketing data team was really realizing with Bombora. So this is, again, tying to that integration with the data pipeline, sales marketing cloud. Bombora was really allowing this team to unload some of the manual work that they were doing before this data model and before Bombora. They were manually taking these lists of data that were unorganized. It was in a spreadsheet somewhere. They had to then figure out how it was going to match to the other data sources, convert it to leads, push it back up to the sales platform, to the marketing platform. This was taking a lot of time, really inefficient process. But Bombora essentially started doing this work automatically. And so that was directly saving each team analyst about 5 hours per week. So that's a total of 250 hours saved per employee on this team per year. And we do apply a save time recapture rate to this type of benefit. So 50% here, kind of reduction on this is accounting for the fact that, not every hour saved is going to directly be reallocated or reinvested into value add work. You do lose some of that. Maybe it's just making your employees work fewer hours. It's an employee experience thing. So we do hedge that a little bit. And the 3-year present value of this benefit is $188,000. So it is the smallest in terms of actual dollar amounts. But as you can imagine, if you were on this customer's marketing data team, this might be the one that you're most excited about because it's really making your day-to-day job a lot easier. Okay, so those were our quantified benefits in the study. Those are the benefits that you're seeing are contributing to our ROI analysis. But we also heard about some qualitative value that this customer said that they were getting with Bombora. So one innovation resulting from Bombora's partnership and thought leadership. They called Bombora kind of an R&D partner for their organization. They said Bombora was helping them understand use cases, drive new initiatives based on how other organizations were using Bombora. And they really spoke highly of this collaboration. That quote there, "This service team was the best I've ever worked with in my 25 years of working with data vendors." Couldn't say more high quality things about the team that they were working with on the Bombora side. Second, so improved employee experience. As I mentioned, in addition to that quantified benefit that's just making their day-to-day jobs easier, the interviewee spoke of other teams at the organization who saw what Bombora was kind of unlocking for the marketing data team and said, hey, like, how can we get value out of this too? And so that led to great cross-team expansion within the organization. And the efficiencies they got there by already having Bombora set up in one area, then being able to easily and quickly get more value from these other teams. I think they mentioned that there were now 11 teams throughout the organization that were all using Bombora's data. So clearly far reaching piece of that data, value from that data that they're really able to unlock with Bombora. And then enhanced value of data from other sources. So again, they had other data like firmographic, technographic data, but they really spoke to how that became so much more valuable when they were able to overlay it with Bombora's intent data and kind of use those together in a 1 + 1 = 3 type situation. And then last, again, I mentioned great customer service. So in addition to the innovation, it was also a piece of kind of issue resolution and using them as a resource to help make sure that their data structure was on par, and just the customer service they experienced was something that this team was really, really happy with. Okay. And so it wouldn't be an ROI study if we didn't talk about costs. We do have 3 main types of costs here. So one is Bombora licensing. So that's a subscription model. It flexes based on things like the number of product lines an organization has, the number of use cases they have for the data, number of countries that they're operating in, things like that. We do speak to this a little bit more in the study itself, as I said. 2, the labor costs. So that's both over a 5-month implementation period, and then also for the ongoing management of having this solution in place. And I will say that's much heavier on the implementation side than the ongoing costs. Ongoing costs, I think, were in the range of $10,000 to $15,000 per year. So really light lift in terms of ongoing management. And then the third cost category is professional services. So this professional services contract was really primarily to develop the data model. So we do understand most customers who are using Bombora don't actually utilize professional services to help them with that. We've included it here because Bombora's data was such a large piece of the data model, but that was really what this investment in professional services third party was. It was for the data model. It wasn't just for the Bombora piece. And as you can see here, the total costs, again, present value 3-year are about $1.2 million. So just to recap, summarize the results one more time, we found a net present value of $4.2 million, an ROI of 342%, and a payback period of less than 6 months. And really just I just love this aspect of the innovation piece. We have this quote here: "They were an active partner with us, bringing us ideas, and that afforded this customer a lot of value too." So that's, I'm just about wrapping up here. I hope you enjoyed this summary. Again, I really would encourage you to go read the full study. It has a lot more context. We explain where we're getting our numbers. Should be something that you're able to use as a framework to develop justification for your own organization. So would definitely think that that's, if you were interested in this, that you would be interested in reading the full study. But thank you very much. And I think we're moving.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. I've got questions for Emma, but I think we'll try to jump into some of the questions in the chat, and they're wide ranging, which are great, and we'll keep an eye and try to do it in the next little bit here. And I'm going to bounce around a little bit in the potential, and hopefully it'll make sense. So there's a question about bands or ranges of surge scores, and do they correlate to the buyer's journey, and do customers basically do different things, sales activation playbooks based on the stage? And yes, the answer is there are, call it, dials that can be turned as it relates to the amount, the number of topics or topic clusters, and the intensity of those scores. And if you think about it at a high level, much of it is about the prioritization of resources. So if you have a large, say, SDR team, and they can handle X amount of, a lot of accounts, then you might use a medium level prioritization of those surge scores, of those company surge scores. If you only, and this speaks to one of the other questions, you have a very small SDR team, then you want to only be giving them prioritization around those accounts that have the highest intensity of intent, which is highest scores and most amount of topics combined. So that way you can dictate the allocation of resources based on the degree of intent. That then is going to address another question. We'll riff on this. Here's like the size of a company. We spoke about a very large organization, obviously, in this example. And where's the breaking point in terms of smaller companies, and does that work? And so I think it was 50 to 200. And indeed, with smaller organizations, it can work. It depends sometimes on the sophistication of their particular stack, their go-to-market, and is this an area that can be optimized? And where Bombora is a small company ourselves, and sometimes there are other areas that can deliver a greater degree of impact. That being said, one of the core facets of our business is our integration ecosystem, which was mentioned here a little bit, but we are sort of platform independent, and we integrate with actually 6 of the 7, sorry, it's Gartner, ABM platforms, and of course into Salesforce and a variety of others. So oftentimes either a smaller account or even a larger account will prefer to work and have the data work inside of those platforms. And for us, it really is helping to work with both that platform partner and the end customer to figure out what's the best way for them to access that data. And so we've got a variety of information on there. The other one is broadly about contacts. Yeah, sure. This is a great question of like, okay, who do we call now that we know that this account is working? And there, again, broadly 2 answers to this. Trying to like channel all of our marketing material for the past 2 years, but yes, we're not handing passing contacts through the company surge data. What we're doing is telling prioritization of the accounts and the topics. However, what happens is that more often than not, that is overlaid with your own CRM system and looking at the contacts that you have. And obviously the personas, the title level, the folks that are on your buyer's committee are the folks that you're going to wind up calling. Additionally, we have a bunch of relationships with contact providers, so that you can bring both the account level data, which we sell, to contact level data to enrich your database. And so bringing those 2 things together gives you both the prioritization and the contact level. The other question, I think we're getting through these. Sorry, actually, I'll go through these now. Emma, I'll ask you a question, sort of what was surprising about anything that was surprising as you went through this process, or compared to what you're normally finding, or that stood out in the study that we didn't discuss.
Sure. So I think, I will admit, first glance, so Bombora is providing essentially, one type of data among many data sources that this organization was using and is still using. But I think something I did find surprising, it was how essential to the data strategy Bombora did become, even though at first, like, it's just, again, one out of many data sources, but how essential that became because of the range of value I think it was providing. Like I said, they had 11 different teams across the organization using Bombora, a ton of different use cases, and they weren't even done. They still had a roadmap for new things that they wanted to do with Bombora's data, new teams and regions that they wanted to roll it out to. So I think just, how much of an impact it kind of had outsized to what I frankly expected going into this conversation with the customer. I also noted was a question in the chat about challenges for this company. And I have a little bit of a cop-out answer because, I specifically asked about challenges and things like this. Implementation and integration is often one where big challenges come up. The customer in this case did say that it went super easily and cleanly, to the point that he was kind of surprised as well. He said that the API was really easy to use. He said that the Bombora team really helped give them supporting materials to make that as seamless as possible. One thing I will note though is, I talked about how this was done in conjunction with a big undertaking, professional services that went into getting the full value out of Bombora. And I think that does speak to you will get out of it what you put into it to an extent. This isn't a solution that you treat as, oh, we'll just kind of add it to what we're already doing and it's suddenly going to create all of this value. You really do have to think about how you're going to specifically activate it, set up different use cases. This customer has been working with Bombora for a couple years, and there were still some use cases, like I said, that they hadn't gotten to yet. So customer cross-sell and upsell for other products and solutions they offered. That's something that they had, I think, been kind of meaning to do with Bombora for the whole time they've been working with Bombora, but they haven't made it a priority yet. And so they're not seeing the value that they could out of customer cross-sell and upsell because they haven't been able to dedicate to fully making that something that they're kind of trying to specifically get value out of, if that makes sense. So I would say that a challenge would be, you do need to be able to dedicate some time, some resources to thinking about how you're going to best utilize this data and making sure that it's enhancing your processes in a way that it's changing them for the better, because it's not going to work if you're still kind of going about things the same way as you were before, but now you just have access to this data.
Yeah, that's a great, and I think that answers one of the questions, what doesn't work. And just from the Bombora perspective is, and we hear this from our customers as well as from the industry and analysts, like if you just assume that adding the data will magically translate into results without actioning on it and putting in place some disciplined way of doing that, then like anything, it's not going to work. I think this will address one of the other questions, is that about prioritization and deprioritization. Intent data is a core of a modern B2B sales and marketing stack, but it's not the only piece. Certainly engagement associated with intent. And so looking at that along with if it's already existing account. So those things sort of need to go into a mix. At the simplest level, you can prioritize. At a more sophisticated level, as this particular customer did, they're bringing in multiple data attributes to push one score of prioritization. So that speaks to the sort of this deprioritization or prioritization. If you have high engagement around an account, at the same time their intent may not be so high, you still want to engage with that account because they're directly interested. If they're engaging with you, visiting your website, et cetera, and there's high intent in the organization, then that should potentially push up the score. There is another one in there about, thank you, Marissa, for asking, about showing our partnerships. There's a lot of stuff on the website, obviously, and we're coming up on time here. About, I think it was a question about re-engaging dead accounts, et cetera. And I think it was they had mentioned it in the study that this happens quite often in that there's no engagement directly with you as a marketer or sales team. They're not hitting your website, they've gone dark, basically. They're not responding to outreach, et cetera. And so they get deprioritized both in, they put in a nurture program and they get deprioritized by the sales team. However, that company is actively researching and looking for the product that you sell. And so what happens then is bringing that score against leads that are in nurture or in the Wake the Dead, as one of our past customers said, it's the Wake the Dead campaign. And you see these scores and you know that something else is happening, they're just not engaging with you, which makes sense. And so then the outreach, and the quote was there, it's timely because they say, oh, we're actually researching this, we just weren't engaging with you. So that's that sort of re-engagement database reinvigoration, if you want to call it. I think we're going to have to end here, and we'll end. And there's a lot on the website, and we'll try to make sure that we got to everything about the intent, the topics, and the taxonomy. So there's two things. We have the taxonomy is available on the site, and you can see if that matches to your category, to your topics, etc. We go through a process of topic curation when we onboard customers. To make sure that they're matching. Additionally, if we don't, we're always growing the taxonomy through that NLP process. And whether that's about topics or brands, named entities, we have a process for adding those into the taxonomy. So it's constantly growing. If we don't have it necessarily today, that doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity to add it tomorrow. And I think the final one, the question from Faye is about helping analyze potential uplift for using Bombora. I'm not sure if that's for Emma or us. I don't believe that. Yeah, we have ways of doing testing and helping you understand. For instance, looking at your historical buyer's journey and understanding the topics that they consumed on that path is one thing we do to understand the opportunity. But I don't think, I don't want to speak for Emma, but I don't think you have a Bombora practice just yet.
Not yet. I can't say that we do, no.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're coming up on time, and this is costs. Yeah, there is, again, we work with the small-ish to the largest companies on the planet. So there is, depending on if you think about it, the impact on your organization, in a way, the pricing and the costs correspond. So a much larger organization with hundreds of sales and teams, they're going to pay a bit more because they need more access and integrations, and that's going to have greater return, as we saw. A smaller organization has less to apply, and the pricing will scale accordingly. So yes, we're up against time, and we could talk about this all day. There's a lot of other resources on the website. Certainly send us a note if we didn't answer your question. Thank you all for the interest and attendance, and certainly thanks, Emma, for taking the time to unpack this for us. And yeah, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.